So we're gonna go ahead and get started here in about 30 seconds. That'll give everybody who's at home a chance to get all excited, turn their computers down or whatever they need to do. Here's a code. So before we actually get started, for those of you who are online, or who are viewing this video at a later time, we want to make sure you are getting the newsletter most likely, so you know about the other activities that we're doing. But there is one activity that I want to put before you, which I try to do every single time I get up here and speak, and that's save the dates, May 3rd and May 4th. May 3rd for the Vegan Fest that's coming up in Eugene, and May 4th for Dr. Michael Clapper, who has a new book out. It's going to be coming out in April, and he's going to do book signing. It's going to be at Springfield High School Monday evening from, I don't know, 7 to 8:30 or 4 to 9. So we're excited to have him come. He'll be at the Vegan Fest also. But the Vegan Fest kind of only allows for about 50 people or so, and the high school allows for 800. So we are kind of going to do advertising around here in Roseburg and Corvallis, Albany, to try to impress him with how many people are interested in what he has to say. Other than that, you may want to be aware that we do this class every single night on Tuesdays from 7 to 8:30, and then we have classes at Natural Grocer on Wednesday afternoon, and now the Seventh-day Adventist Church on Thursday afternoon. Those classes are only going to be an hour. They're kind of doing so many, it's kind of like the voice can hold up for so long, maybe. But anyway, we're having fun doing a lot of classes, and we're doing a lot of classes also to try to engage more people in this community, so more will come to see Dr. Clapper. We'll see what happens afterward. Maybe we'll get to be like Roseburg just had an announcement that they're starting a new class, I believe in a week. And they say, we've had thousands of people come through our classes, thousands over the last 10 years. And they've had improvement in their health with heart disease and diabetes, high blood pressure, and all those things. And that's what we're talking about here. Our classes up here have a foundation from down there. And so there's no reason we can't have thousands of people over the next 10 years also. So other than that, I want to do a little spoiler alert. Some people don't have a lot of time and they say enough's enough. We hear enough about plant-based stuff. So for this topic on fiber, where we're going to try to do a deep dive into it. So when you get done, you'll understand what the benefits of fiber are, where you get it, how much. So what's the spoiler alert? It's the same message in every single class. What is it? Crowd out the animal products in your life. Bring on more plant-based, whole plant foods. And why is that? Well, that's the basis of what we're talking about today, the magic of fiber. Where do you actually get fiber from? You get zero fiber from any animal product. And every plant product has fiber. Some have more than others. And so we're going to be discussing that today. And this is one of my favorite topics. The science is truly fascinating. I hope you get fairly excited, as I do, about this topic as best as you can. And with that said, let's go ahead and look at the first slide about the magic of fiber. And maybe we could turn a light down in the back or two. Thank you. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so here's the first slide. Our foods have changed over time. For those of you who come to the introductory lecture, you understand that we are eating more sugar, more oils, more cheese, and not as much fruit and vegetables as we used to. Let's go to the next slide. How much has our food changed? Let's take a look at the chart. In 1900, the average American, used to eat 5 grams of sugar, 5 pounds of sugar per year per person. Now in 2010, it was 77, and right now it's closer to 100 pounds of sugar per person per year. Pretty impressive if you haven't seen these statistics before. Most of you have, that I see in the room. Oils and fats have gone from 4 pounds a year in 1900, 100 years later, to 74 pounds per person per year. Let's look at the cheese. Has gone from 2 pounds a year to 30 pounds per year. Now, if you add up the amount of calories and fat content here, and sugar, it's no wonder that we have a problem with 2/3 of our population being overweight. And we would also understand a lot of these cause inflammation, which leads to so many of our chronic diseases. Now, let's go down, ignore the rest of the figures, and let's go down to the fiber. The fiber is the very last line. The average American today is getting how much? 14 to 15 grams of fiber per day. What does our country recommend? Anybody know for the average amount of fiber? Our country, United States of America, recommends 25 to 35 grams of fiber. We're getting less than half of that amount. The countries that don't have diabetes, heart trouble, chronic illnesses, overweight, they are getting 60, 80, and 100 grams of fiber a day. How much do you think Christine and I are eating every day? We want to be healthy, like the Blue Zone people. We look around the world, and what are they eating? 60 to 80 to 100 grams. So we're getting 60 to 70 grams of fiber every day. It's been 14 years. We're alive. We're not all plugged up because of all the fiber we got from the plants. All right, let's go to the next slide. If fiber were discovered today, it would be classified as a multi-system drug with hormone, immune, and metabolic effects. It would probably be as popular as Ozempic and Wegovy and all those weight loss drugs. Next. We already told you the average American is eating about 15 grams of fiber a day, slightly less for women, more for men, but 25 to 35 grams a day. And I did a search on ChatGPT because I just wanted to see what it would have to say. And I must tell you, I got about 30 slides from ChatGPT, thanks to you, Pam. And it was amazing how close. Those slides kind of discussed everything I wanted to talk to you about tonight. Maybe even a few topics more. They mentioned chronic disease rose as fiber intake fell over the last, century? So if you think about it, and fiber is that important, if there, you really have to wonder, is this a cause and effect kind of issue? And I hope by the time we get done today, that you might think, wow, maybe I need to think about fiber in a different way. Let's go to the next slide. Fiber is the most underrated nutrient. Why is that? Because we don't think about fiber as being food. We think about fiber as that celery kind of sticky stuff, the stringy stuff that you spit out, or you chew on something and you can't hardly get it to dissolve in your mouth. And it's not very attractive or inviting, the concept of fiber. But this fiber that we personally can't digest is food. It's food for our friends. And who are our friends? We have this symbiotic relationship with trillions of bacteria that are living in our gut, in our lower intestinal area. Trillions of bacteria. Their food is fiber. If we starve those bacteria, they do not feed us back. Butyrate, which is anti-inflammatory and suppresses our appetite. They don't feed us back serotonin, which is the feel-good, antidepressant, anti-anxiety hormone. They don't feed us back. By the way, serotonin is a precursor of melatonin, the sleep hormone that's important for us also. So we lose on some of these hormones and chemicals that actually promote health through cutting down on inflammation, boosting our mood, making us feel better if we don't have enough fiber. Well, what did I just tell you about the average American? Are we getting enough fiber? The answer is no. Let's go to the next. What is fiber? So it's non-digestible carbohydrates from plants. Fiber is sugar. Then you say, why would I want to eat more sugar? Does that make any sense? If you really are believing the message, we have to avoid all sugar. You may say, I don't want to have more fiber in my diet. But it doesn't get absorbed like other sugars. We'll tell you why in a moment. So it passes intact into the colon, gets fermented by your microbiome, broken down, and those helpful other chemicals are given back to you. Next slide. Okay, here's what I'm going to explain, which I thought is really fascinating science. We have bones that keep us upright. What keeps plants upright? It's fiber. So let's look. We take a plant, it has a cell. It has cells in the plant, whether any plant, beans, potatoes, rice, fruit, vegetables, they all have cells. If you break the cell down, you find that there are cellulose fibers. These microfibers are made of these molecules. And you know what these molecules are? They're sugar. They're sugar molecules. But if you look here, you have some hydrogen bonding, and I'm not going to go into major biochemistry with you, but I want to tell you, the bonding occurs, it's sort of like if you put your fingers together, they're really firm connections that don't break apart easily. That's why the digestive juices, hydrochloric acid, pancreatic juices, they don't break down these bonds. It takes fermentation by our microbiome to bust these sugar molecules down. So you will not get a rise in your blood sugar because you're eating more fiber. It's kind of fascinating science, actually, that it's sugar that's fiber. But it's sugar that doesn't get dissolved. Yes, sorry.
do the microbes get their sugar from that carbohydrate?
So the microbes,
Molecules?
they probably get their energy, they ferment this and they probably get energy by obtaining the sugar that way. That it's a good thought. I haven't actually researched that. So Ken, that's your next project to help me out. We can do a Google search and figure that out. But they get plenty of energy if we feed them. If we starve them, they don't have enough to feed us by the chemicals they make. And I'm not sure what that process is, but it's an interesting topic, and I'm sure we're going to be fascinated by it. Yes.
So, just out of curiosity, I looked at the composition of sugar, it has carbons in it, and there's no carbons up there.
You know, they left the carbon out, but the carbons are like here and here and here. They're all throughout. They just left them out.
Cause you wanna show the positive and negative, the bonding probably,
Right.
okay.
Okay, good thought. Boy, we have some good questions here tonight. I love it. I love it. Yes, Karen.
Just to remember what we're talking about. Carbohydrates, the shortened version CHO. So carbohydrates are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen.
Oxygen. Good thought. Good way to remember it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, fiber comes in different types. Not all fiber is so tightly bound that it is like that stiff kind of stuff that you're chewing on. Some of it is still bound and you can't use it, but it becomes kind of mushy. That's called soluble fiber. Do you know what you might be eating when you get soluble fiber? What kind of food comes to mind for breakfast? Oatmeal. Oatmeal gets a little mushy, yeah? Gets a little jelly. It still has those tight connections, but they're not so tight that it can't get a little bit mushy or a lot mushy compared to the other kinds of insoluble fiber. So you've got soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. That's two types of fiber. So the soluble dissolves in water, forms a gel-like material. It combines with glucose, excess cholesterol, excess estrogen, excess testosterone. So it can combine with toxins like dioxin and mercury and maybe plastic beads that are hormone disruptors that you get when you love that fish. So that's the soluble fiber. The insoluble fiber increases your stool bulk, and it's the prebiotic. That's the food for the probiotic. The probiotics are your bacteria in your microbiome. So there's a couple different kinds of fiber there. And then there's resistant starch. Resistant starch acts like, sometimes it acts like soluble and sometimes like insoluble fiber. Resistant starch comes from reheating up after cooling down potatoes or rice or some of the starchy foods in your life. So there are many ways that you can improve the fiber. And that's why it's important to eat a variety of different plant foods so that you're getting a variety of insoluble and soluble fiber. Next slide. I'm trying not to go too fast, but I don't want to go too slow. So you can stop me if you need, or you can say, hey, speed up. You're boring me. Anybody lost, or is everybody here with us today? We're good? Okay. Let's look at some examples of fiber. Here we see what's in this cup. above the fiber word. Looks like beans, huh? That's one of the best sources. 7 grams of fiber in a half a cup is a serving. How many cups, how many servings of legumes do you think Christine and I eat every day? It's 3. That's what Dr. Greger recommends on his daily dozen. It's not hard. How many grams of fiber is that? 7 times 3. We don't need a lot of mathematics here, but that's 21. That's more than the average American is getting right there, right? 21 by just pushing out some of the animal products and bringing in 3 servings of legumes into your life. There are other foods. There are fruit and vegetables. For every serving of fruit, it's about 3 grams of fiber. Every serving of vegetable, about 4 grams of fiber. Every serving of whole grain, about 3 or 4. So, how many servings do you think we're eating a day of fruit? We're eating 4 or 5 servings of fruit a day. We're eating 5 servings of vegetable a day. We're eating 3 servings of whole grain. Add those up with a serving of nuts, 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup, and all of a sudden you get to 60, maybe 70 grams of fiber. It's not so much, but it's plants that have a lot of fiber. And we tend not to have in our diet any animal products. Why? There's no fiber. I tend to repeat myself sometimes. You'll have to excuse that. But sometimes repetition can be helpful in our life. And so we're going on to the next. Oh, there's resistant starch. That's the potato starch and bananas and just potatoes themselves, potatoes and rice and beans and lentils. Those all can have resistant starch. And remember, the resistant starch can act like soluble sometime or insoluble other time. So getting a variety of different plants is really helpful in your life and very health promoting. We're going to get into how health promoting soon. Next slide. So we talked about the soluble fiber, which is the gel formers, oats and barley and psyllium, and the resistant starch, and then the insoluble is the fermentable prebiotic beans and onions and garlic. Have a lot of that food for what? Your microbiome. Your friendly bacteria. Think of these as friends. I know when you hear the word bacteria, you think infection, antibiotics. Why would I want to feed them anything? Well, they're feeding you back. These, if you feed them their food, and they're healthy for you. Next slide. The fiber feeds the microbiome, the gut microbes or the bacteria, they ferment that fiber and they produce, what was it? Butyrate. That's a short chain fatty acid. It's anti-inflammatory. They also produce serotonin. Okay, next slide. The microbiome, I guess those are bacteria that are somehow in there, those little purple things. What you eat determines the kind of bacteria you populate your microbiome with. Just like there are animals that live in the ocean, they have a certain environment and they have a certain food source. Desert animals, they have another food source and a different environment. If you feed certain foods to your microbiome, you will populate with certain kinds of bacteria. If you feed other foods, you will get different kinds of bacteria. Let's talk about that. Remember the spectrum, all meat, carnivore diet, all plants, whole food, plant-based, somewhere in the spectrum. Let's take the average American eating 90% or more of animal kind of products for their calories. What are they populating their microbiome with? They're populating with a certain kind of bacteria. The bacteria is called Bacteroides. You can learn about this on Dr. Greger's site, nutritionfacts.org. Just do a search on this and you'll be fascinated by the science. Bacteroides is promoted. They will grow. You feed them, they will grow and multiply by feeding them meat, dairy, and eggs. As it turns out, Bacteroides will not feed you back butyrate. They won't feed you back serotonin. They will feed you back TMAO. When you eat carnitine or choline, steak, and eggs, these breakdown products will lead to TMAO, trimethylamine N-oxide. They actually produce TMA, which gets converted in your liver to TMAO. It's an inflammatory molecule which pushes the LDL cholesterol into your arteries and causes plaque buildup. So if you're eating meat, dairy, and eggs and populating your microbiome with Bacteroides, you're going to be increasing the level of TMAO in your body, leading to more inflammation. This is a choice you get to make in your food choices. No one ever talked to you about this in junior high or high school or your parents or grandparents or your culture. This is a kind of a new concept to me. But if you choose to just eat more fiber, which is just more plants, you will then populate your microbiome with a bacteria called Prevotella. The Prevotella species is the one that will feed you back the butyrate and the serotonin, cut down on inflammation, make you less anxious and depressed, feel better. What kind of microbiome bacteria do you want in your body? This is a choice you get to make. So I'm kind of sharing this with you. I get kind of excited sometimes sharing this with you because it's so fascinating. And I try to think of what words can I say to pique the interest, because most people don't want to change what they're eating. They like what they're eating. And so to tell them to eat something that's sort of different, or maybe a lot different, is a challenge. But it's a fun challenge. Next slide. Let's see the first video. I only have 5 of them tonight, and it's only 20 minutes total, so we won't be here all night.
Symbiosis, fruits and veggies, grains and beans, whereas dysbiosis, bad bacteria that may contribute to disease, are fed by meat, junk food, fast food, seafood, dairy, and eggs. Typical Western diet. With us are nourished by fruits and veggies, grains and beans, whereas dysbiosis, bad bacteria that may contribute to disease, are fed by meat, junk food, and fast food, seafood, dairy, and eggs. Typical Western diets can decimate our good gut flora. We live with trillions of symbionts, good bacteria that live in symbiosis with us. We help them, they help us. And a month on a plant-based diet results in an increase of the good guys and a decrease in the bad, the so-called pathobionts, the disease-causing bugs. Given the disappearance of pathobionts from the intestine, one would expect to observe a reduction in intestinal inflammation. So they measured stool concentrations of lipocolin-2, which is a sensitive biomarker of intestinal inflammation, and within a month of eating healthy, it had declined significantly, suggesting that promotion of microbial homeostasis, or balance, by a strict vegetarian diet resulted in reduced intestinal inflammation. And this rebalancing may have played a role in the improved metabolic and immune system parameters. On an animal-based diet, you get growth of disease-associated species like Bilophila wadsworthia, associated with inflammatory bowel disease, and A. putridinus, found in abscesses and appendicitis, and a decrease in fiber-eating bacteria. Eat fiber, and the fiber-munching bacteria multiply, and we get more anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, short-chain fatty acids. Eat less fiber, and our fiber-eating bacteria starve away. They are what we eat. Eat a lot of phytates, and your gut flora get really good at breaking down phytates. We assumed this was just because we were naturally selecting for those populations of bacteria that could do that, but it turns out our diet can teach old bugs new tricks. There's one type of fiber in nori seaweed that our gut bacteria can't normally break down, but the bacteria out in the ocean that eat seaweed have an enzyme to do so. When it was discovered that the enzyme was present in the guts of Japanese people, it presented a mystery. Sure, sushi is eaten raw, and so some seaweed bacteria may have made it into their colons, but how could some marine bacteria thrive in the human gut? It didn't need to. It transferred the nori-eating enzyme to our own gut bacteria. Consequently, the consumption of food with associated environmental bacteria is the most likely mechanism that promoted the enzyme update into our own gut microbes, almost like a software update. We have the same hardware, the same gut bacteria, but they just updated their software to chew on something new. Hardware can change too, though. The reasons this is called the way to a man's heart is through his gut microbiota is because they were talking about TMAO. Certain gut flora can take carnitine from the red meat we eat, or the choline concentrated in dairy and seafood and eggs, and convert it into a compound, which may lead to an increase in our risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. This explains why those eating more plant-based diets have lower blood concentrations of the stuff, but they also produce less of the toxin even if you feed them a steak. You don't see the same conversion, suggesting an adaptive response of the gut microbiota in omnivores. They are what we feed them. It's like if you give people cyclamate, a synthetic artificial sweetener. Most of our bacteria don't know what to do with it, but if you feed it to people for 10 days and select for the few bacteria that were hip to the new synthetic chemical, eventually 3/4 of the cyclamate you eat is metabolized by the bacteria into another new compound called cyclohexylamine. But stop eating it, and those bacteria die back. Unfortunately, cyclohexylamine may be toxic, and so was banned by the FDA in 1969, whereas regular Kool-Aid, evidently, is completely safe. But if you just ate cyclamate once in a while, it wouldn't turn into cyclohexylamide, because you wouldn't have fed and fostered the gut flora specialized to do so. And the same with TMAO. Those that just eat red meat or eggs or seafood once in a while would presumably make very little of the toxin because they hadn't been cultivating the bacteria that produces it.
So I hope you got from that you can alter your microbiome by what you choose to eat. Just because you've populated your microbiome for many, many years by eating the standard American diet, that can change. And let's talk about why is fiber so important. We feed the good bacteria and they feed us back. We talked about butyrate. Butyrate is not only anti-inflammatory, but it also feeds back to your brain and says you've had enough to eat. And so it reduces your drive to continue to eat and eat. Serotonin, 90% of the serotonin is produced in our microbiome. And the wheelbarrow effect we talked about, excess cholesterol and estrogen and toxins are wheelbarrowed out of your intestine. So for every 10 grams of fiber you add to your diet, actually even 7 grams, let's see the next slide. I used to say 10. All right, well, we'll get to it. You reduce your heart attack risk by 10%. You reduce your breast cancer risk by about 8%, and your colon cancer risk by about 10% for every 10 grams. 10 grams is how much? It's a serving of legumes, half a cup of beans or lentils with a serving of fruit or vegetable. That will give you 10 grams. So you do that 3 times a day, you're up to 30 grams all of a sudden. All right. Butyrate, we've talked about. It's a short chain fatty acid. You don't need to remember that, but it's good for anti-inflammation, anti-cancer, immune boosting. Next slide. The butyrate is also a cancer protective molecule. It reduces inflammation, and it also promotes the destruction, apoptosis of cancer cells. Apoptosis means the cancer cell wall and dies. Next slide. Let's see the next video of good bacteria. There's 2. This is a real short one, and then one more after it.
Our friendly flora's digestion of fiber also yields another short-chain fatty acid called butyrate, which may fight against cancer by slowing the growth of colon cancer cells and activating programmed cancer cell death, as well as preventing cancer in the first place. Butyrate may explain why fiber-filled plant-based diets are so anti-inflammatory. A recent review concluded that butyrate seems to exert broad anti-inflammatory activities and might be a good candidate to evaluate in the fight against obesity-associated and systemic inflammation in general. Now, they're alluding to using it as some kind of supplement, but we can produce more on our own naturally 2 ways. Number 1, eating more plant foods, since it's a byproduct of fiber digestion. And number 2, we can boost the number of butyrate-producing bacteria in our colon by eating more plant foods. Different butyrate production capacity in individuals according to diet. Not only do those eating vegetarian harbor more good bacteria, period, vegetarian fecal samples showed the highest number of copies of butyrate-producing genes. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, believed that all diseases begin in the gut. Of course, he also thought women were hysterical because of their wandering uterus. So much for ancient medical wisdom. But something like constipation can have a major negative impact on physical, mental, and social well-being. It's often overlooked in healthcare. This may be because poop talk is taboo.
but can have a severe influence on their everyday living, both psychologically, physically. Constipation can hurt, causing abdominal discomfort and pain, straining, hard stool, infrequent bowel movements, bloating, and nausea. No wonder laxatives are among the most commonly used drugs. Most are safe when used judiciously and intermittently, but because of the frequency of their use, they do end up being one of the most common causes of adverse drug reactions. Perhaps treatment should instead address the underlying problems, such as lack of dietary fiber. You probably don't need a meta-analysis to demonstrate that dietary fiber can obviously increase stool frequency. Populations in most Western countries must be considered by world standards to be almost universally constipated. Here, it's an epidemic among the elderly, but simply not a problem among those centering their diets around fiber-rich foods. Where is fiber found? This patient summary in the AMA's journal sums it up, with an illustration: whole, unrefined plant foods. Now, for those of us smug in our intake of fruits and vegetables, we need to realize that fruits and leafy vegetables are the poorest whole food sources of fiber. Why? Because they're 90% water. Right? Root vegetables have more, but the fiber superstars are legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, as well as whole grains. And gram per gram, fruit fiber doesn't seem to have the same effect. It may take 25 grams of fruit fiber to double stool output, something just 10 grams of whole grain fiber or vegetable fiber can do. And that's not all fiber can do. If you eat some whole grain barley for supper, by the next morning your good gut bacteria are having it for breakfast, releasing butyrate into our bloodstream, a compound that seems to exert broad anti-inflammatory activities, which could help explain why significant decreases in the prevalence of inflammation are associated with increasing dietary fiber intakes. Check it out. And the highest group here was just getting the minimum recommended daily intake of fiber. So what, if you have knee pain or something, you should eat more fiber-rich foods? We didn't know until now. Dietary fiber intake in relation to knee pain trajectory. Thousands of patients were followed, and a high intake of dietary fiber, which is to say just the minimum recommended intake, was associated with a lower risk of developing moderate or severe knee pain over time. And two Framingham studies found that higher fiber intake was related to a lower risk of having symptomatic osteoarthritis in the first place. But wait, don't a variety of diseases have an inflammatory component? How about fiber consumption and all-cause cardiovascular and cancer mortality? They found that compared to those who consumed the least fiber, those who consumed the most had 23% less cardiovascular disease mortality, 17% lower risk of dying from cancer, and 23% lower mortality from all causes put together. Unfortunately, most persons in the United States consume less than half the recommended intake of dietary fiber daily. These researchers suggest all sorts of potential mechanisms for which fiber could be life-saving, from improving cholesterol, immune function, and blood sugar control, but there also may be more of a direct cause. If you ask people to bear down as if they're straining on stool, you can get a rapid increase in intracranial pressure inside your skull. And indeed, if you look at trigger factors for the rupture of intracranial aneurysms, if you ask hundreds of people who had strokes, bleeds within their brains, one of the biggest trigger factors noted was straining for defecation, multiplying risk sevenfold.
That more fiber in your diet. It's a simple answer. The science is amazing. The statistics are interesting, more than interesting. They are pretty convincing as far as I'm concerned when you can reduce all-cause mortality. You can reduce mortality from cardiovascular disease, from cancers, decrease osteoarthritis pain. These studies are not just one occasional blip in the scientific literature. The weight of evidence is demonstrated. If you look on nutritionfacts.org, you'll be able to read the articles yourself, the evidence-based articles, and decide, geez, why haven't I been told this all along? And whether you've been told it or you haven't, maybe you could say, maybe the new learning, I may want to do something different. Next slide. Now, we're going to run through this, what fiber does, pretty quickly because I want time to have questions answered by all of you. Fiber, as far as your gut barrier is concerned, sometimes you can get leaky gut where it's called dysbiosis and chemicals can enter. It's a thin layer protecting you from the outside world, your intestinal tract. And that can kind of open up and allow toxins to get into your bloodstream. Well, fiber protects against that. It reduces endotoxin leakage, lowers systemic inflammation. Next slide. Fiber and hormones, GLP-1. Okay, we're going to talk about GLP-1. Do you all know what that is? Ozempic and Wegovy and these weight loss drugs that are so prominent in the news. Did you all know that you can make your own GLP-1? Let's talk about that for a moment. When you eat food, the food goes into your mouth, chew it up, goes into your stomach. If animal product, what do animal cells have around them? Do they have cell walls like all that fiber? No. What do they have? A membrane. It's a flimsy membrane. It's a membrane that's easily digested and opened up by your hydrochloric acid and pancreatic juices. So you eat any animal product, meat, eggs, or meat, dairy, or eggs. You put it in your mouth. It travels down to here, about to where your stomach is. It gets busted up, and so the protein, carbohydrate, and fat gets absorbed high up in your intestinal tract. When you eat plant products, you gobble that plant up, chew it up as best you can. It comes down to your stomach, and what now? It has all this fiber and the cell walls intact. It doesn't get, those cell walls don't get broken down up high. They have to travel all the way down where? To the lower intestine. What's in the lower intestine? You all know right now. The microbiome, those bacteria, but there's something else there. What else is down there? There's specialized cells called L cells. These L cells actually release GLP-1, this protein that's Wegovy and Ozempic and these weight loss drugs. You can make your own, but they only release the GLP-1 if the protein, carbohydrate, fat gets opened up and released down by your microbiome where the L cells are. So if all your foods are being absorbed up high, you don't get any GLP-1. Now, what happens when you highly process a plant food? You make a Impossible Burger, or you make some fake sausage. You've stripped away a lot of the fiber, and the food, when it gets dumped down into your stomach, it doesn't have the usual cell wall, so it gets absorbed where? Up high. So highly processed plant foods like olive oil, they're not the healthiest choices in the world for you. You're not going to be producing your own GLP-1. Okay, let's go on to the next. You understand now? Animal products absorbed high, plant products that are grown in nature, they get absorbed down low. The L cells kick out the GLP-1. They suppress your appetite. They cut down on inflammation, reduce insulin resistance. They're really beneficial for you, but you don't get them unless you're eating whole plant foods mainly. Making your own GLP-1 next. Let's see. So fiber, why not just take the GLP-1 drugs? Well, as it turns out, you get from fiber many systemic benefits. We talk the butyrate production, the loss, the wheelbarrowing out of the excess toxins. It's on and on it goes. Whereas GLP-1 is just GLP-1 doing its thing. The cost is more expensive for GLP-1, but what's the real issue in my mind? It's the no side effects with the fiber, and its side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, that cause about 80% of people who start on Ozempic to stop after about 6 months or so, at least according to Greger's statistics, if you go to his site. Next. For cardiovascular disease, I said for every 10 grams, you'll decrease your cardiovascular heart attack or stroke risk by 10%. Well, it's even better. For every 7 grams, you decrease about 10%. So if you want less risk of dying from heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, eat more fiber. Strongest benefit you get is from whole grains and legumes. Why is that? Because they have more fiber. Now, there's fiber in every fruit and vegetable, but not as much in the quantity that you're eating because of all the water that's in the fruit and vegetables. Whereas the legumes are, don't have as much water in them. So they have pound for pound more fiber. Okay, next slide. The fiber protects the heart. It lowers LDL. It improves insulin sensitivity, reduces inflammation, improves the lining of your vessel walls, all your blood vessels, your brain and your heart and your kidneys. Next slide. So it protects the heart. It's fiber in colorectal cancer. There's an inverse relationship because of the faster transit time. It speeds the toxins out of your colon fast, so they don't have as much time to sit against the colon wall to produce cancer. And the butyrate inhibits tumor growth. So a couple different mechanisms where fiber is best for colorectal prevention, colorectal cancer. Next slide. Breast cancer, benefit there by lowering excess estrogen level and improving insulin regulation. Next slide. Reduce pancreatic cancer risk, reduce gastric cancer risk, and evidence emerging for ovarian cancer. These are from ChatGPT source. Next. Fiber in type 2 diabetes. Improves your insulin sensitivity, reduces diabetic incidence. Next slide. Fiber and weight regulation. You can make your own GLP-1. We just talked about it. It improves, you get down to your ideal body weight. Next slide. I don't know if you're getting convinced. What more are you worried about? Dementia. Of course, you don't want dementia. And the short chain fatty acids influence neurotransmitters. They reduce neuroinflammation. It's good for your brain and for your mood. What more can fiber do? Next slide. More reasons. Normalizes your bowel movements. It helps maintain your bowel health, less hemorrhoids and diverticular disease. Lower cholesterol levels, reduces your blood pressure, helps control blood sugar, helps in achieving healthy weight, live longer and healthier. Scott talks about squaring the curve. You want to live until you don't. You don't want to spend your last 10 years in chronic illness. So what might you choose to do? A little more fiber, perhaps. Next slide. God, I'm having way too much fun here. Let's talk about beans and lentils. We talked about them as the best source of fiber. Chickpeas are part of the beans and lentil group. Berries are good, chia and flax and oats and barley and vegetables, and any plant you name is healthy when it comes to adding more fiber into your life. What's missing? The standard American diet fare is missing. Okay, next slide. How much fiber is enough? We talked about it. You know how much we eat. Focus on variety, increase gradually. Some people say eat about 5 grams extra a week to allow to repopulate your microbiome so you don't get the gassiness and fullness that's so common with beans. Beans, the musical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot. You know, a lot of people say, I will not eat beans. You know, I get too much gas and bloating. If you do it gradually and you look at fiber fuel and listen to Dr. Bolshevitz, he'll tell you, go gradually, go slow, keep adding little bits at a time until you get there. It's important. Next slide. Fiber supplements. Well, why not just buy fiber supplements? Well, this was from ChatGPT, but Dr. Greger has a good video on how the fiber supplements have not been shown to have the same benefit as fiber from the whole plant food. So they don't replace whole foods. Whole foods provide synergy, and most of the supplements do not provide the same benefit. Maybe psyllium seeds may be helpful in certain cases, but try not to depend on supplements for your fiber. The reason why, think about supplements. You go to a concert and you listen to a beautiful Mozart symphony. Wow, you're mesmerized. And you say, I especially love the flute section. So you take all the flute players and you put them on another stage and you bring in 100 other flutes. And all those flutes play the same Mozart symphony. Does it sound the same? No, it does not. Foods as grown in nature is the way to go, not the supplement route. Except for vitamin B12, you probably should be taking that, unless you're eating nutritional yeast 3 times a day in a pretty large quantity, more than I want to eat. Greger has clarified that you can either eat a supplement once a week or once a day if you're over age 65, or you could be feeding yourself nutritional yeast 3 servings a day to get enough. It's a lot of nutritional yeast, which most people won't do. And you need to be careful about the brands that you're using. Next slide. Video 4. Okay. We'll get down here soon.
Fiber-containing foods may not only help prevent heart disease, but help treat it as well. Heart patients who increase their intake of fiber after their first heart attack reduce their risk of a second and live longer than those who don't. But what if we really don't want to have a heart attack in the first place? If 7 grams of fiber gets us a 9% reduced risk, would 77 grams a day drop our risk 99%? Well, that's what they used to eat in Uganda, a country in which coronary heart disease, our #1 killer, was almost non-existent. Heart disease was so rare among those eating these traditional plant-based diets. There were papers published like this: a case of coronary heart disease in an African? After 26 years of medical practice, they finally recorded their first case of coronary heart disease in a judge consuming a partially westernized diet, having fiber-free foods like meat, dairy, and eggs displace some of the plant foods in his diet. Were there so few cases because Africans didn't live very long? No. The overall life expectancy was low because of diseases of childhood, like infections. But when they reach middle age, they had the best survival, thanks in part to our #1 killer being virtually absent. Of course, now diets have westernized across the country, and it gets to now be their #1 killer as well, from virtually non-existent to an epidemic. Some blame this change on too much animal fat. Others blame it on too little fiber, but they both point same solution, right? A diet centered around unrefined plant foods. In fact, sometimes it's easier to convince patients to improve their diet by eating more of the good foods to kind of crowd out some of the less healthy options. The dietary fiber hypothesis, first proposed in the 70s, zeroed in on fiber as the dietary component that was so protective against chronic disease. And since then, evidence has certainly accumulated. Those who eat lots of fiber appear protected from several chronic conditions. But maybe fiber is just a marker for the consumption of foods as grown, whole, unprocessed plant foods, the only major source of fiber. So maybe all these studies showing fiber is good are really just showing that eating lots of unrefined plant foods are good. Fiber is just one component of plant food, and to neglect all the other components, like all the phytonutrients, may be to seriously limit our understanding. Why did Drs. Burkitt, Terrell, Painter, Walker, the fathers of the fiber theory, place all their bets on fiber? Well, one possible explanation for this is that they were doctors, and we doctors like to think in terms of magic bullets. That's how we're trained, like one pill, one operation. They were clinicians, not nutritionists, and so they developed a reductionist approach. Right? The problem with that approach is that if we reach the wrong conclusion, we may come up with the wrong solution. Burkitt saw disease rates skyrocket after populations went from eating whole plant foods to refined plant and animal foods. But instead of telling people we should go back to eating whole plant foods, he was so convinced fiber was the magic component, his top recommendations was eat whole grain bread, but they never used to eat any kind of bread in Uganda, and sprinkle some spoonfuls of wheat bran onto your food. But studies to this day associating high fiber intake with lower risk of disease and death relate only to fiber from food intake, rather than from fiber isolates or extracts. It's not at all clear whether fiber consumed as a supplement is beneficial. In retrospect, maybe it was a mistake to isolate fiber from the overall field of plant food nutrition. The evidence supporting the value of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, as opposed to only fiber, has proved to be more consistent, much more consistent. Plant, whole foods are what's of fundamental importance in our diet. Fiber is just one of the many beneficial components of fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, and beans. Much of the effort on defining fiber and studying the fiber isolate would have been better applied to a whole plant food approach. What would have happened if Burkitt and others had instead emphasized the value of plant foods? The value of eating unrefined plant food, which incorporates fiber and phytonutrients, might have been the focus of attention rather than just isolated fiber, which leads people to shop in this aisle for their fiber instead of this aisle.
Get your fiber from whole plant foods. Don't be focusing on the supplements aisle to get your fiber. Okay, next. Some common myths. Fiber causes bloating. Well, it can if you're eating too much fiber at one time, but if you do it gradually, probably not. Fruit, and it'll usually clear within a few weeks. It's not likely going to be persisting forever. Fruit sugar is bad. Remember, fiber changes the metabolism. It holds on to the sugar so you don't get a steep rise in your blood sugar. a lot of people have these glucose monitors. And so they've been eating animal products all along for the last 3 months. They've been putting a lot of fat into their cells. And so they have high insulin resistance. So when they eat fruit or they eat just about any food with carbohydrate, their sugars rise and they think that's the problem. But the problem is the fat from all the animal products that they've been eating or the high fat content of their diet, which has led to high insulin resistance, making it appear as though it's the fruit that's causing their diabetes or blood sugar problem. That's another lecture in itself. If fiber bothers my gut, I should avoid it. I've had a lot of people tell me I can't eat beans and I don't like lentils or whatever. And again, the gut adapts when the fiber is reintroduced slowly. So it's worth giving it a try. Next slide. Fiber is foundational medicine. It feeds the microbiome, regulates hormones, lowers heart disease risks, reduces cancer risks, supports longevity. Next slide. Next slide before we go on to that video. Eat more plants. The big takeaways, and then we're going to do a Q&A, are eat more plants, eat them whole, feed your microbiomes daily, your microbes or your bacteria, and let your body make its own medicine, the GLP-1. Next slide. These are some of the references. They were kind of included up above. Next slide. And these are some of my questions for you. What bacteria do you want in your microbiome? What's the deficiency in the American diet? I think you have the answer. And what to eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, I want to review. So we can turn the lights on. If you have no questions, I have an extra video to play on paleo poo. And what that video talks about, it talks about how when the butyrate gets produced by your good bacteria, it comes back and feeds your brain and said, you've had enough to eat, so you stop eating. But what happens if you don't have enough fiber in your diet? Then you don't get butyrate. You don't get the messages to say, I'm full. So you keep eating and eating and eating, just like most Americans are doing. Wow. I've had a lot of fun talking with you like this. Now let's go for some questions. I'll repeat them for those of you online as best as I can.
So you have there the questions, what to eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And since you and your wife are totally plant-based, could you give us an example?
Yes. Yeah. So, okay, we want an example. Let's talk about breakfast. If we had our, a lot of floundering around initially. We started with oatmeal. So oatmeal was what we looked upon as, instead of bacon and eggs, we can eat some oatmeal. Well, after we got a hold of Gregor's Daily Dozen at some point, we started thinking, wait a second. We want to incorporate some beans throughout the day, 3 servings. We want to incorporate whole grains, 3 servings. We want to incorporate fruit, 4 servings, and vegetables, 5 servings. So how are we going to accomplish that? We used to eat 3 meals, and we've transitioned to 2. The 3 meals consisted of oatmeal, like maybe 3/4 of a cup. We've advanced that to a full cup, so we get 2 servings of oatmeal. We started with regular oats. And then we decided, well, maybe steel cut oats might be a little better because they have a little more fiber. And we weren't particularly wild about doing the steel cut oat thing. And then we found groats. Groats is the original form as grown in nature. It doesn't have any of the fiber stripped off of it. It's not cut, so some of the fiber falls off of it. But it takes longer to cook. But Instapot came along and allowed us to cook groats. It takes about I don't know, 24 or 5 minutes. Scott cooks it up to 40 minutes in the Instapot, and it's firm. It's not the mushy oatmeal that's people don't like. You know, if you overcook oatmeal, it gets kind of mushy and, it's still healthy, but not the most attractive to the palate in my case. But we eat a full cup of before it's got water or, heated up of oats. So that's 2 servings of whole grain. We added, let's see, we had a couple servings of fruit. We had, we started incorporating some beans at some point, like a half a cup a piece of legumes, which were sort of in a separate cup. And then we started putting them in a bowl. And then Christine, we went to a seminar and they said, how about eating greens? Aren't you eating greens? And we said, for breakfast? And they served us these, like steamed greens, and they were pretty good. So we started with a leaf of kale or a leaf of like romaine lettuce, I think we started with. And then we went to maybe 2 leaves, and then we went to a leaf of kale, and then collard greens I learned had more calcium. And so we went to a leaf of calcium, and then we started combining them. And soon Christine kept adding month after month after month, a little more and a little more. And pretty soon the one little leaf has become 4 or 5 cups that gets steamed, chopped up, like 2 leaves of collard green and 2 leaves of kale and 2 leaves of chard, and chop them up. Or you could add dandelion leaves in there. And then we had broccoli. We like broccoli. So we had a serving of broccoli, half a cup of broccoli to 3/4. So we put that in a bowl. And Christine likes hers steamed, and I like mine raw. So we steam hers. And then we added a mushroom in there because we learned mushrooms have aromatase, which is anti-cancer and helpful. And I hated mushrooms before I ever did this 14 years ago. I never wanted to eat them. And now I look forward to having a bit of mushroom. And so then what else did we add? Carrots we added into there. She takes yeah, this is breakfast. Yeah, it's sort of like kind of a weird breakfast. And so on the groats or oatmeal, Christine put a fruit, like half a cup of frozen berries. Blueberries is our favorite. And we buy a lot of frozen blueberries, and we do strawberries and other frozen, but at least a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup. She dumps hers in the cereal. I like mine on the side. I like a few grapes in the morning, so we put a few of that in there. I like an orange, so we do half an orange a piece. I like what kind of seeds there? This is what our breakfast kind of looks. Thanks for finding that in. So you see there's oranges and strawberries, and there's beans, and there's a few pumpkin seeds, and I like to do a little sprouts, but this has all come about over 14 years. It's like we didn't do this our first month or our first year or our first 10 years. This has progressed to the point where my mouth is watering. I love breakfast so much. I just like wish I could share this breakfast with someone who's never had it before. I don't know what their taste buds would say. They might go ballistic and feel like they're getting electrocuted by the garlic that I put a little clove in there and a little piece of. I try to incorporate like 30 or 40 different plant foods. You don't have to do all that. But I'm telling you, you can mix and match whatever you choose to do, however you want to put it together, keep it separate. But you want to try to get for the whole day, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner. And by the way, potatoes, really an easy dinner. You take and microwave the potato, cut it open, put in some beans or hummus, put some salsa on there, grab a couple handfuls of greens of some sort. And then for dessert, you have fruit, 1 or 2 servings of fruit. And if 1 potato isn't enough, then get 2. How can you eat 2 potatoes? Isn't that too much sugar? No. The problem is if you take a potato and you fry it up, that's too much oil and fat and calories. Or you take a potato and put bacon bits and sour cream and cheese in there. That makes the 70-calorie potato the 350-calorie bomb for your health. So potatoes are an excellent thing to add into your diet. Yes. This is one of the two, but you're only seeing the vegetable and fruit part. You're not seeing the whole grain part. We've got another bowl of groats with soy milk or a plant-based milk of some sort. Breakfast is pretty big and we're pretty stuffed, sort of like a snake that eats the rat, whatever it is. We're feeling pretty bloated until later in the afternoon. But I'm not saying you all have to do this. Well, oh, here's the groats, the other meal. We add a little goji berries, add a little flaxseed, add a little chia seed. But you do what you want. You don't have to do all this. This is like overwhelming to most people. But I want to tell you this is fun. We do this together. It's like we go for our walk together. You know, we may not talk a lot, but we look at nature and the other thing. But at breakfast time, we get a call or whatever it might be. We talk and discuss what we're doing. Sometimes we're quiet, but it's an activity, a love activity that we do together. It's no longer a painful chore to have to chop up a vegetable. Yes.
Said before tonight that you recommend 2 cups of groats for breakfast, which I eat that, but I only put a half a cup of dry oats in the water and it comes out at least 2 cups. Am I supposed to have 2 cups of dry? Would you recommend 2 cups of dry?
I'd recommend 1 full cup of dry.
There you go.
1 full cup of dry. But if you cooked it up in water, then that
A lot more.
a lot.
Raisins in oat groats. If you cook them together, man, that's good. Because we're always starving for sugar, so that's.
So again, the sugar content is going to be regulated by if you're cutting out the high fat diet, your insulin resistance is going to go down. You'll deal with the oats fine.
And the raisins.
And the raisins. You'll deal with the raisins fine. And if you're not, then we'll look into it further. We'll do some other consult with you about whatever the issue is. Yes. So how much are we eating?
That's 2 cups I put in there. Taste us that.
So what we eat is she cooks up 2 cups of groats in the Instapot and fills it with water about what, an inch above the level. And then once they're cooked up, then we take out how much? Cup and a half? You put a full cup?
Because for me, I think when I make my big pot of groats, it's 3 cups of dried groats and then cook that in the Instant Pot for 40 minutes. That lasts me a whole week. So I eat that myself in a week.
Again, gradually increase it. Don't start out with too much. Look at Gregor, what he has to say on his daily dozen. 3 cups of whole grains. See what he has to say about the whole grains that you're eating. Okay? Yes.
It's not as dense as the groats.
So when you're eating oatmeal, it's not nearly as dense as the groats. When you're eating the more dense, then you're eating a smaller quantity. But most people are not eating groats, they're eating oatmeals. Again, the goal here is not to eat a specific amount of oatmeal or other, it's to get 3 servings of whole grains, 3 servings of legumes, 4 servings of fruit, 5 servings of vegetable, approximately as a guideline. and whatever works for you. If you need more, you need less, you do it. Yes, go ahead, Edward.
Does the density, say like between oatmeal and groats, how much does that affect satiety?
The difference between oatmeal and groats in satiety?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know the percent that it affects satiety, but I will say that the groat has more fiber, which will affect your GLP-1 more, so it will suppress satiety. But the regular oatmeal is really healthy too. I don't want to discourage people by saying you have to buy groats. By the way, there's buckwheat if you don't like oats. There's what is it? Bulgur, amaranth, sorghum, kamut. There's a whole bunch of different grains. Yes.
So I'm doing really well with doing more beans and greens, but I still like some sour cream with it. Is that canceling some of the benefits?
So what is it that you're eating the sour cream with?
Beans and greens.
If you're otherwise getting the health benefits you want, and you have a little sour cream as a taste, probably okay.
You ever make
If you have other issues going on, the sour cream.
you ever made tofu sour cream? Yeah, so you can just
What's that?
tofu sour cream.
Here,
I make it all the
yeah,
time.
here, let's Scott.
So you just get two of the little like the firm tofu. Like I get them at Market of Choice, the little blue firm tofu things. So the recipe is just two of those in your blender, and then it's 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, or no, red wine vinegar, and 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. So it's just the 2 little boxes of the firm tofu, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. You just blend that, and then it looks just like sour cream. You chill it in the refrigerator, and I use that anytime I would use sour cream. I use it on my salads or on pasta or whatever I was going to put sour cream on, quinoa taco or something like that. And it's great. It's just tofu. Yeah, that works. I
Or are those 8-ounce containers?
think so. Whatever the little boxes are.
Okay, any other questions that we have? This has been a lot of fun. I don't know that I need to play the other video. There's no other issues that anybody has here. We don't need to stay here till 8:30. We only have 4 more minutes anyway. We can get out. It's a rainy night. Leave a little early. I want to make. What's that? You want to play it? Okay, play the paleo group. It's kind of a fun video. Number 5.
In the US, we tend to get less than 20 grams of fiber a day, only about half the minimum recommended intake. But in populations where many of our deadliest diseases are practically unknown, rural China, rural Africa, they're eating huge amounts of whole plant foods, up to 100 grams of fiber a day or more, which is what it's estimated our Paleolithic ancestors were getting based on dietary analyses of modern-day primitive hunter-gatherer tribes and by analyzing coprolites, human fossilized feces. In other words, paleopoop. These most intimate of ancient human artifacts were often ignored or discarded during many previous archaeological excavations, but careful study of materials painstakingly recovered from human paleofeces says a lot about what ancient human dietary practices were like given their incredibly high content of fiber, undigested plant remains, strongly suggesting that for over 99% of our existence as a distinct species, our gastrointestinal tract has been exposed to the selective pressures exerted by a fiber-filled diet of whole plant foods. So for millions of years before the first stone tools and evidence of butchering, our ancestors were eating plants. But what kind of plants? One way you can tell if animals are natural folivores or frugivores, meaning leaf eaters or fruit eaters, is to map the area of absorptive mucosa in our gut versus their functional body size. Folivores are those meant to eat mostly foliage, leaves, while frugivores are better designed to eat fruit. The faunivores eat the fauna, another name for carnivore. If you chart animals out this way, they fall along distinct lines. So where do humans land? Here's our functional body size, and here's our absorptive area. So while eating our greens is important, it appears the natural dietary status of the human species is primarily that of a fruit eater. Why does it matter how much fiber we used to eat? Well, one theory for the rising levels of obesity in Western populations is that the body's mechanisms for controlling appetite evolved to match how many plants we used to eat. Our ancestors ate so many plant foods, we were getting like 100 grams of fiber a day. So for millions of years, food equaled fiber. So no surprise, one of the physiological mechanisms our body evolved to suppress our appetite involved this fiber. For example, fiber is metabolized by our gut flora into short-chain fatty acids, which bind to and activate receptors on the surfaces of our cells that alter our metabolism. For example, activating receptors on fat cells to increase the expression of the weight-reducing hormone leptin. Other hormones are affected as well. Since until recently, food meant fiber. An increase in food intake meant an increase in fiber intake, which made our gut bacteria so happy they made lots of short-chain fatty acids, activating the cell surface receptors, releasing a bunch of hormones that make us lose our appetite and downregulate hunger, so we eat less. But if we eat less, there's less fiber in our gut, so less of these hormones are released, which boosts our appetite, we get hungry, and we want to eat. But what if food doesn't equal fiber, like on the standard American diet? Then we keep just getting those signals to eat, eat, eat. We're always hungry. If we haven't eaten our 100 grams of fiber for the day, our body may be like, what, are we starving here? Discovering this mechanism makes the food and pharmaceutical industries very excited. They figure they can now come up with, the new drugs in the fight against the current obesity onslaught, or we could just eat as nature intended.
So I hope you've got a little bit of excitement about fiber and plants. Yes.
Man, whenever you see pictures of prehistoric man, he's always killing something carnivore. He's killing an animal.
You never see him eating plants. And my theory is he must have eaten an awful lot of plants because they were abundant and easy to capture.
Yeah.
So we need to change that picture.
Yeah, well, the meat dairy industry, have done a good job of convincing the public that that's the way to go, at least in our country. So good thought. It's been fun talking with you all. Next week, Scott is going to be.
Is Elizabeth talking about
Elizabeth is going to be talking about
avoiding risky substances and some food addiction?
use of substances and food addiction and whatever else. We love listening. Come, it's worth your time. It's been fun. Thank you all for coming. Tried to change up a little.
Yeah, there's
there.
Like that.
Yeah.